Amazing. I love Sierra's laugh, smile, and seeing that up front. Sarah and Sierra are incredible climate investors and just great people in general. And I'm so excited to have them both here for a chat. And so the general format of this is we go back and forth amongst the three of us for about 40 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes are audience Q&A. And so we have a Slido that Denise will be posting throughout the next 40 minutes where you can ask whatever question you want. And so I would say, this conversation will touch on some things a bit more high level or deeper than other things. If you want us to drill in on anything, that's where you post your question in the Slido and get to come up here and ask them yourselves. So anyway, that's the format. Sierra and Sarah are both the founding partners of Voyager VC, which they can tell you more about, but it's a super, super exciting new fund, and we'll, enter them throughout. You'll get more about their background as well. But the first question I have, well, first, thank you for being here. First question I have is, how did you two meet? You two are both badasses in your own rights, both experts in your own right. What's the meeting story?
Yeah, the origin story is that we were introduced by a fellow founder, successful serial entrepreneur, who called us each up a couple of years ago and said, I have found the other side to your coin. You need to meet this person. And this is the first and last time he's ever said this. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, this is serious. Who is this person? I called Sarah up and we had a call scheduled for half an hour. And 2.5 hours later, we were like, we need to do things together. Like, I've really found my fellow traveler. This is it.
Amazing. Sarah, was the feeling mutual, I'm guessing?
My heart. You have those like meetings or calls where you remember where you were standing when that happened. So, I mean, that's true for both of us. I remember exactly where I was when Sierra and I first spoke, and we were making plans to work together, to meet up. We were on different coasts, we still are. And I'm very glad I took the call.
Amazing. I am too. And so, Sierra, you've said this really, you inspire me with the vision that you've had for Voyager from the beginning. And Sarah, you as well. And so I'd love to, this is both your way to introduce the fund and sort of what it is, but I think to share really like what your visions and the goal was from the beginning and sort of how that's panned out now. And so Sierra, if you want to go first, and then Sarah, you can add on to that or whatever you want to do.
We'll both have thoughts here. I mean, this is our lives' work. We have collectively been working on climate stabilization for 28 years, and we have each throughout our careers tried to identify the highest point of leverage at that particular time. For me, that was getting started in policymaking, trying to design market mechanisms that I thought could leverage the financial system to better address climate risks and climate stabilization. For Sarah, that was starting highly valuable, highly scalable companies in climate tech. And Voyager for us represents the fact of accelerating destabilization of the climate system. We don't have longer than 10 years. And that accelerating rate of risk being matched, happily, by accelerating innovation throughout the climate technology spectrum. So we see that there's a possibility to invest in technologies across biotech, mobility, energy, materials, you name it, that are lower cost and better performing than their fossil fuel incumbents. And through their massive commercial scale in that under 10-year timeline, really address the physics and the chemistry of the climate system in a way that is ecologically meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Sierra said, the goal in starting Voyager was to be as high leverage as we can. We recognize that we have decades of experience that we have earned as company founders, as company builders, as policymakers, and looking ahead to what we can do to accelerate decarbonization going forward. We could hypothetically start a company, or we can use that experience, across multiple sectors and multiple technology types to help dozens of companies succeed and really accelerate their success and help them smooth their path to market, to future financings. And we've been able to do that. We are excited to continue to do that for the years ahead.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not wrong, you all set out to raise a lot less than you ended up raising. So how much did you actually end up raising? What was that process like? Yeah, I'll stop there.
So everyone tells you raising a fund one is 24 months of people telling you no. So we got out there, we kicked off our fundraise on Earth Day 2021. We thought, okay, well, buckle up, here we go. And 6 months later, we've been effectively oversubscribed on our $100 million hard cap for fund one, which is, it's still incredible. And it's from an amazing community of LPs. That was far faster and far more than we had anticipated initially. And the response from the market, I think the recognition of the durable value being created in decarbonization and investing in the early stage of energy efficiency, of electrified transportation, of novel materials. It was so obvious over the course of the past 2 years. And so, yeah, we closed Fund 1 at 100 million. We are currently raising an opportunity fund focused on Series A's and beyond for companies. And that's it's going well too. So the momentum in climate technology investing we've been doing this now for the better part of 3 decades, has never been stronger.
So I think you're being very humble by saying like the space is blowing up, and it was easy because the space is blowing up. I think that as you sort of touched on, and I want to go dig into a little bit. And as a reminder for everyone here, last 20 minutes are Q&A. Add your question to the Slido for anything that you're curious about and want to go deeper on. But one thing I definitely want to go deeper on is just you both have really unique backgrounds, I think, individually, and then together you guys have this like awesome complementary skill set. And as someone from the outside, I think that that's probably part of why you were able to raise so quickly and so well. And so, like you said, Sierra, like your background is a bit more in policymaking. Sarah, yours is a bit more in both building like incredible, huge companies and also science in your latest endeavor. And so how do you think those backgrounds have helped you as a VC, maybe evaluate companies, help companies, whatever that might be? And Sarah, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we recognized in our very first phone call that we caught you all up on. I really recognize that Sierra has a completely aligned sense of values and mission in decarbonization. It's what she spent her entire career on. You really can't do that overnight, right? If you look at what someone's chosen to work on, both in their last job and every job prior over their entire career, it really is a sum of what they care about and what they find meaning and value in doing. And so I recognize that Sierra has been working on climate as I have for many years, but from the dimension of policymaking and really understanding how policy, how regulatory frameworks, and how market designs and the design of financial structures can enable the success and the real scale and growth of companies. And that's what she has been doing quite successfully for many, many years across some of the most important sectors. So financing, for example, solar deployment, which is a huge part of the energy transition. And my own journey has been really in starting from the underlying foundational technologies on up. That's where I naturally focus. I've never studied econ. I'm a tech nerd, very proudly and happily. And that has taken the form of both company building and academic research. So in terms of company building, I co-founded Getaround in 2009. Really, that was, for me, a path to reducing emissions from private car use by enabling car sharing. And then working at the first lab-grown meat and lab-grown leather company, Modern Meadow, again, very much an environmental story there around reducing the impact of livestock and the emissions related to them. And then more recently, in the PhD program at MIT, studying the next generation, the frontier, most efficient frontier for carbon removal. And so those are the two lenses and experience sets that we really bring to looking at early stage opportunities. And they're both equally relevant and important. The success of any really big scalable tech company is going to be based on, okay, what does the foundational technology allow and enable, and where can this, and when, and how can this technology and the product you build around it be cheaper and better performing than a fossil fuel alternative? But also, what does it look like to manufacture and finance this at scale? If you're deploying some kind of large amount of infrastructure, or like maybe building a factory, who's going to pay for that? And is this coming off the balance sheet of the company, or are there other sources of financing that make more sense? Are there regulatory frameworks that are particularly supporting, maybe in different regions, maybe it's Europe, maybe the US, this particular technology deployment? And all of that put together is the picture that determines how successful those companies will be.
Mm-hmm. I completely concur. I mean, again, Sarah was the only person, we jokingly say Sarah was the one person I want to speak with every day for the next 30 years, but it's actually true. And I think it's also, the recognition that the market opportunity at this that next set of billion-dollar businesses is being built in climate and decarbonization. It's at the confluence of three things, three big forces. One, as Sarah points out, across the technology spectrum, that there are technologies now, decades of R&D paying off in material science, in mobility, in computing, in biotech. I mean, you name it, that are producing technologies that are lower cost and better performing than the fossil fuel alternative. That's where Sarah has a better documented track record of success than really anybody else out there at the early stage in technology investing. So that's the foundation. And then the market that's driving the deployment of those technologies, that's the corporate and government commitments to net zero and, frankly, customers voting with their wallets. And that's where I have 16 years of background in the market-driven approach. I got my start in 2005 at the International Energy Agency, where I joined the team that was responsible for advising the European Commission and the OECD and the G8, so the largest economies in the world, on financially oriented climate policy. And in practice, this meant helping to design the first carbon markets in the EU emissions trading scheme. So that's the lens that I've always sort of seen the opportunity in. It's like financial incentive alignment for overall harmonized economic decarbonization. That's the top part. And then the third, and this was the missing piece for so long in a major way, is that the founders showed up. Like 2 years ago, people had this recollection of, oh, this is the moment. This is where it was the combination of the day that the sun didn't come out in San Francisco, and it was that terrifying orange day. Like, this is real. This is my life. And there is massive opportunity to be created here. And so we've seen technological foundation, the market demand, and the founders putting everything they have, all their experience, all their networks, all their talent into building in climate tech. And it's like, that's what created the opportunity. And that's why we launched the fund when we did.
Incredible. So I took a risk by not like formally introducing your backgrounds in the beginning, which I hope wasn't, it was not a sign of like, it was more of a sign of you all can do this much better than I can because your backgrounds are so awesome. So I'm glad that you built it into that. But I really loved how you said essentially those three pieces were the decades of tech advances. So Sarah, that was on you. Market thriving or deployment and market driven approach, that's Sierra. And then the founder showing up, and I think the operators, just like the entire ecosystem of people coming into climate, and the people who were deep in climate and climate science getting more excited about business and technology and like the way to make an impact in that field as well. And so maybe, I don't know how this question will go, but what are like the tangible outcomes or ways that you all have seen your fund or your approach be different than maybe other VCs or others in the climate space, given the backgrounds that you have and the vantage points that you have?
Yeah, I will both have thoughts here. I think we can move quickly. We bring 28 years of experience in both company building, in policy making, and advanced academic research, and in angel investing for the past 8 years. And that enables us to focus in on the business models that we think are going to be truly transformative. And we were a small team, and there's a lot of opportunity for capital deployment and for exploration across the climate tech space. But we bring a baseline of domain expertise that enables us to just move fast. So that's really helpful. As a former policymaker, I also see things through the lens of policy accelerants, regulatory accelerants, and then inhibitors too. And most other investing teams don't have that direct experience at the supranational level, at the federal level, and the state level. I spent time working at the California Public Utilities Commission between grad school terms, not because it's sexy, but because it matters. I mean, PUC is really important. And that helps us to really think through, okay, so this is because we're not investing strictly off of first principles. Businesses are created in the real world, not simply on theory. But we see plenty of elegant theory, beautiful, elegant, novel technologies, terrific theory. And then we have to think about, well, how is this going to create $1 billion plus outcome in under 10 years? And that is where we can think about the financial market accelerants, the regulatory accelerants. That's the lens that I tend to bring through. And Sarah can speak to, the fact of her vision as both a company builder and as truly a visionary researcher. I mean, her graduate work at MIT in carbon removal has served as a blueprint for additional academic research from top labs worldwide. I mean, she gets like literally fan mail for her grad thesis, which I don't know anybody else who does. It's amazing. And for entrepreneurs who are now incorporating some of her initial findings into building businesses in carbon removal. She's also one of the few technical advisors to the Frontier Fund, which is a $925 million advanced market commitment for carbon removal, backed by Stripe, McKinsey, Microsoft, and other top corporations. And that's just a level of technical expertise and vision that enables us to move fast. And Sarah she has X-ray vision on this stuff. It's amazing.
I don't know about that, but I will say that, given our operational expertise and also just a number of years we've been working on so many of these challenges, we're able to look for and spot new kinds of businesses and new types of technologies that have not previously been applied in this way to these problems, because we've seen what's worked, we've seen what hasn't worked, and we have that sort of radar looking out constantly, blipping the horizon for those solutions that are the missing piece. So that is part of why we're able to recognize things sooner. And we have a history of building at that frontier of stuff that hasn't been done before. We're going to need to do a lot of stuff that hasn't been done before to decarbonize the global economy. There's, on the one hand, deploying stuff in more efficient ways that we know works, which is, solar, lithium-ion batteries, light-duty electric vehicles, and there's huge opportunity there. There are so many multi-billion-dollar businesses to be built in any of those areas. You could run an entire fund or a series of funds just on top of that. But what's also exciting is the development and deployment of technologies and products that we've never needed before. And so we never tried to build them. On the one hand, that's kind of low-hanging fruit from a business perspective, but it also represents a lot of challenges, both on the business and on the technology side. We get very excited when we see these new ways of thinking about a problem that other people haven't thought about before. Getaround, I think, is one example of when you see a foundational new capability. In that case, it was smartphones in 2009. Had only been out for 18 months. Most people didn't have one. I didn't have one. I was designing an app for a smartphone when I'd never actually had an app or a smartphone before. But you could recognize it for the first time ever. If millions and millions of people have GPS in their pockets and digital payments in their pockets, you can start to have people connect with vehicles, which are also becoming sensor-laden and interconnected in real time. And you can have things like dynamic routing networks for transportation that you just couldn't have done before. And if one is not looking for something that's new and that's never been done before, you're probably going to reject that because you just don't see why anyone would do that or why it would work, or you'll find a million reasons, why to say no. So we look for the reasons to say yes, because from, the foundational level, there is something, whether it's on the market side or the technology side, that's unlocking new ways of doing things, because we will need to unlock a lot of new ways of doing things, of having, medium and long duration energy storage, of dynamically routing energy, the way that we're now used to sort of dynamically routing digital information across mobile networks and now people and goods with a lot of the other services that have sprung up. So it's really exciting. As you can tell, we are delighted at the opportunity that's opening up in front of us, but as a differentiator for how other folks think about climate tech, we focus not just on the things that are sort of known to work as business models and technologies, but also the things that have never been done before. We're very excited to find those kinds of opportunities.
Cool. So I want to spend some time digging into exactly that. So one quick question, I think, it might not be, but do you take policy risk, where essentially that like core to a business's model could be the need for a policy that you think might get passed, or might, how do you think about that risk?
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, this is spoken with love as a former policymaker as well. We did not invest, tangible example, we did not invest in companies that require defined price on carbon to make the core unit economics work. We did not invest in companies that require ongoing subsidies to be competitive with a fossil fueled paradigm. We are looking for companies that, through their technological superiority and the simple cost superiority relative to a fossil fueled incumbent, can dominate a market or create a new market of large scale in under 10 years.
Amazing. And so what I want to dig into is like examples, right? And one of my favorite questions to ask is like, what startup ideas are you looking to fund? Kind of a request for startups or spaces for people to focus on. Because I think we're in this space where so many people want to work in climate and are questioning, like, where do I spend my time? What do I focus on? And I think it's such a useful question for people who've spent decades of their careers in it and sort of get the trends. So I'm actually going to ask that question after I asked the first one, which is maybe related. But Sarah, you talked about like some examples of interesting innovations used in interesting ways. I think you said it much better than that, right? But essentially being able to see those innovations and being able to make bets on them. And I'm just curious if you can share some examples of, not stealth companies, obviously, but companies that you can share or investments that you've made or companies that you're excited about that do that, just as tangible examples.
Yeah, of course. So we led the pre-seed round for a company called Getaround. And this is a company that is really recognizing the dual potential for EV batteries. So the batteries in electric vehicles are useful in more ways than one. The primary use that everyone's aware of is electrifying light-duty transportation. That's wonderful. We're very excited about that. We've made multiple investments in the supply chain around electric vehicle batteries, decarbonizing the production of the metals, the key metals that go into those batteries. But it also represents a sea change in how people just access and own energy. The only energy that people have really had access to before personally, stores of energy that they can keep and or use or dispatch in large quantity, has been fossil fuel. Your oil burner in your home, if you're a homeowner, or your gas furnace. If you have a car, the gas tank in your car, which is not that much energy, but still, well, it's actually a lot of energy. It's not that many gallons. It's very dense. But it's, it's all fossil fuels. And there is some big limitations to having all of your energy that you own stored in a fossil fuel. I mean, you can only get it out, can only abstract that energy and use it for stuff with a combustion engine, which of course is not very fluid compared to, say, an electric battery. Electric battery can send very safely electrons in and out in sort of any configuration you want to the grid, to other devices. It's not a thing you can do with a combustion engine. And so full acceptance of that idea actually unlocks lots of interesting opportunities to use that energy in new ways beyond the vehicle. So some of what's been talked about is just allow, software layers that will enable people to charge when it's cheapest, which is usually going to be overnight or at peak solar times during the day, which is great. I mean, that's one piece of what you could do, but there's so much more you could do. You could send that energy at times of peak need to other places. And you, as the owner of that energy and that device, have potentially a lot of power, no pun intended, and potentially can also earn revenue off of that. And it may sound odd, sort of like this big question mark, but everything sounds odd before you've done it. We don't really care if it sounds odd. We care if it's actually meaningfully useful and can help speed decarbonization. And if it represents a marketplace and a use case where all the participants win and they're all incentivized to participate. So one can think about virtual power plants that, a large proportion of people in this country will have, and they're going to have them if you have an EV. It's a question of then what do you do with that? That's really exciting. We really like these, not just sort of the primary effect of some element of decarbonization, in this case, electric vehicle, but the second and third order effects that enables, which may not be so obvious before you sort of reach that level of market penetration.
In this particular company, it has the capacity to really create a movement around power delivery. It is taking the delivery of electrons out of the constriction of fixed poles and wires and utility ownership or transmission distribution company ownership into the hands of citizens. So it can create a citizen utility. It can create, an Uber or a Lyft for power delivery. That is a massive opportunity. And it's a fundamental, perhaps, rethinking of the overall electricity market when you have virtual power plants on wheels that can be orchestrated through a software layer and a double-sided marketplace for pricing demand and supply for electrons. It could completely change how we buy and sell electricity in the United States and obviously in other markets where you have large-scale penetration of electric vehicles. So, we're really excited to find this and fund this particular company. We led the pre-seed round. It's also, a terrific founder, serial entrepreneur with training in battery systems optimization from her PhD at Carnegie Mellon University. So right founder, right market, right time.
Amazing. And I took a lot out of that, including that I think just being interdisciplinary and even like the way that you said fluid, Sarah, I thought was interesting, thinking about like software and like other sorts of, just like bringing in all these different disciplines into climate is really helpful, right? Like I think that's something that I truly believe, and I think you all are testaments to. And then the second and third level effects as well, right? Like I think just that sort of thinking, that systems thinking is incredibly helpful. And so we know EVs are interesting in general, or you know, that's one space potentially. The grid in general is interesting. What are other, and you can be as general as or as niche as you want, but industries that you think people should be paying attention to and potentially, you know, building more innovative solutions or business solutions in, or like if you have actual requests for startups that are like, we want to fund this type of startup. We haven't found one yet, but if you know of anyone that has this one, we will, you know, happily take a look.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have formal RFPs, but we certainly have business models that we're excited about finding. Someone just put in the chat, metals and mining. I mean, absolutely, the supply chains for critical inputs to electrification of transportation. It's a massive opportunity. We've made some investments there already. You know, our very first investment out of Voyager Fund 1 is a company that's creating carbon negative nickel. Nickel is the most used element in electric vehicle batteries. And we see that there's huge opportunity given the total shift in global transportation towards an electrified paradigm for supply chains to catch up. They haven't yet. So that's an interesting opportunity for truly investment at overall scale. So continuing on the sort of the second layer effects of overall vehicle electrification and frankly electrification of all things, appliances. We're looking for companies that are enabling participation in a transactive energy economy. Is one example of this is GigaLab, that company we just mentioned, that is using software to orchestrate potential charging and then dispatch, so sale of power from personally owned electric vehicles. Interesting opportunity for investing in other software companies that are enabling large-scale participation of distributed energy assets into the grid. So we like those foundational layers. We are, and obviously we invest in North America and Europe. We recognize right now the opportunity for electrification and energy efficiency across Europe has never been geopolitically more acute. And so that's an interesting opportunity for us to invest as well. We've already made some investments in the energy efficiency stack within Europe as well, and can continue to look for interesting European companies that are electrifying and saving energy for European consumers, both businesses and residential consumers. We are interested in companies shifting entirely that create carbon removal as a co-product of a core revenue generating model. We don't take pricing and policy risk in these current funds on defined demand for carbon removal. And we recognize that there is yet real value being created there. So we like to look at companies that have carbon removal as potential upside because of the massive demand, particularly in the voluntary markets, for additional and permanent carbon removal. We don't know how big that market is going to be yet and what the window for timing on that is. And so we like to see companies that are well positioned to capitalize on the upside as an additional revenue stream. We've made 2 investments of that type. One is in the carbon negative nickel manufacturing, that's just creating massive amounts of magnesium that can be used for atmospheric carbon removal. And another is a recent investment, not yet announced, in a company that is an ag tech company enabling sequestration of atmospheric carbon into calcium carbonates in soils. So both of those models we really like. Sarah will also have some interesting ideas on things that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many areas to decarbonize, basically all the areas. In terms of what has disproportionate impact on the emissions profile of the world in the coming decade or two, heating and cooling technologies. We're very interested in ultra efficient heating and cooling technologies, both for homes, for commercial businesses, and for industrial use cases. So that would be industrial heat, a pretty different sector, but producing all of the world's stuff takes a lot of energy and specifically a lot of heat that is almost all supplied by fossil fuels right now. That's just sort of the historical origin of how we make steel, how we make concrete, how we make, I mean, all of the plastics are petrochemical derived directly, plus the heat energy that goes into them. So we need to decarbonize all of those things. That's the challenge. The exciting opportunity is we haven't tried before. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And generally speaking, combustion is really inefficient. You lose depending on what you're doing, but if you're running combustion through a combustion engine, you lose about 40% of your energy just as waste heat. That percentage loss will differ depending on sort of how the heat's being channeled and what you're doing. But there's tons of room for improvement, both in terms of what energy how are you supplying that heat? And also in just rethinking these production processes entirely. Do you need 2000 degrees Celsius heat to do the thing you're trying to do, to make the steel, to make the concrete, to make the whatever, the purified metal from ore? Or could you do that through electrochemistry? Could you do that through membrane separation? Could you do that through lasers? I mean, we've seen companies working on all kinds of things. That's huge, just that opportunity to rethink processes that are in some cases haven't been touched in 50 or 100 years. Like the technologies we have to make these things are not necessarily the best technologies. They're the best technologies we had 100 years ago when we came up with the process. So that's very exciting, because for any company that really has a good way to improve one of these processes, a meaningful degree, one, you're now have a path to decarbonize some of the world's biggest industries. And you also can potentially save a huge amount of money for those customers, because if you're shaving off the energy use by 20% or 50% or 90%, that's billions and billions and billions of dollars of savings that you've created, and hence value you've created as well. So there's just so much room to innovate here. It's really, really exciting. And we're very keen to talk to companies that have innovations in any of those areas.
And I think last but not least, just in terms of how we think about the opportunity, we invest in biotech, deep tech, software, all in foundational decarbonization, 6 areas in energy and efficiency, food and materials, carbon removal, built environment, mobility, and then the confluence of information analytics and climate impact. So that's everything fintech, climate tech. That's for, trained as an economist, love looking at. So climate risk assessment, the overall tools for carbon market risk rating. Love thinking about that alignment of the financial system as it stands with the accelerating physical risk that's happening all around us, whether or not we price it. So we are opportunistic in investing across the opportunity set in climate and really focused, as Sarah pointed out, on foundational decarbonization wherever it appears.
Amazing. So one, I'm just super inspired by how foundational, like you said, foundational, right? Like I think that is exactly what you all are thinking about. How do you make the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time? And you're not being fluffy about it, right? Like I think that you're being very, very deliberate and very deep about all these things. So one more reminder for the audience, we have Slido. It already has incredible questions. You can upvote people's questions, and that's how we know what questions to ask. And so go ahead and upvote your favorite questions. And then I have 4 more minutes with you all, and I'm going to just give you an option of a few different topics that we can talk about. One, how do you actually manage looking at all these different companies that are across all these diverse areas? It's maybe one question that you can choose. 2, comparing Europe and US, what they're good at, what they're different at, and how to sort of help them be better in general. And 3, maybe what are the biggest risks to success for either your fund or the climate tech space in general? So choose one of those questions as your last 4-minute question.
Oh, Sarah, you choose.
Do you want to talk about Europe versus North America?
Sure, happy to. So we've been active in both North America and European climate tech for a long time. I mean, I got my start in 2005, literally in Paris, in working in climate tech and climate stabilization at that point. And we've seen the ecosystems evolve. I mean, Europe has a pricing mechanism in the form of the European Emissions Trading Scheme that's recently hit at some points 100 euros a ton for carbon, which really does give a sense of the signaling on investment in long-lived infrastructure. And that's, it's been a helpful foundation for really driving decarbonization across Europe in a way that we don't benefit from in the United States. I think the geopolitical importance of decarbonization in Europe right now is acute. I mean, February 24th, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has helped to underscore that in a major way, that, reliance on Russian gas is in no one's interest ever. And decarbonization is essential and needs to be accelerated now, both for economic reasons. We're seeing price spikes in European energy costs, which are incredible. I mean, they're incredibly hard on households, businesses, industry. It is not sustainable to be paying these types of prices, one. And two, that there is a geopolitical urgency in creating the next set of decarbonized technologies, in aviation, in energy production. And that's where we see focused political support from European sovereigns, which is really exciting. I mean, the United States has, $370 billion Inflation Reduction Act, which is amazing. It's like Christmas for the entire climate technology spectrum. It's going to be an amazing accelerant on deployment for technologies. And in Europe, you see both the confluence of focused public financing and regulatory prioritization of advanced manufacturing in decarbonized technologies. So it's been an interesting time to invest, certainly in both North America and Europe. I'm actually only serving on European boards right now, and the conversations can be very efficient in terms of the overall deployment and partnership with favorable regulatory entities across Europe.
Anything to add, Sarah?
I think that was a great answer.
Agreed. Excellent. So thank you for your focus on just like hard to decarbonize spaces. Think on the foundational pieces, incredible. We love it. And first question is actually sadly anonymous because that person can't come up. If you do want to add your name to any of these, if you did ask them, feel free, but you'll get me for now. So how are you measuring the potential and realized impact of the fund? Are you using any tools or models to quantify carbon emissions avoided, reduced, captured?
Yeah, so, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we do hold ourselves accountable. We're actually in this to achieve large amounts of scalable decarbonization. That is the reason why we're doing this work every day. So what that means in practical terms is we have set a target of 500 megatons CO2 equivalent emissions avoided or sequestered by the portfolio in aggregate over the lifetime of the fund. Obviously, we would hope to meet and then exceed that. What that means is also we have flexibility across the portfolio. So we have made investments in companies that are directly removing and permanently sequestering CO2 in very scalable ways. And then we also have investments in companies that are enabling that activity to happen. So hypothetically, a carbon accounting company would not be itself removing the carbon, but it would be enabling other companies to. And both of those things are important and necessary in the ecosystem. So we do have a quantified target. When we look at every opportunity before we make an investment, that is an explicit part of our investment mandate, is understanding where the carbon reduction is coming from, verifying that it is real, it is additional, verifying the claims the company is making. We see a lot of claims for carbon negative food products. Explain to me how that's going to be carbon negative when, some food that gets consumed does not stay locked away that carbon forever in geologic time. So, we do our own assessment in all cases of what we actually think the carbon reduction or sequestration is going to be per, unit of energy used or saved, per unit of product sold. And then we project out over time where we think this company will be over the lifetime of the fund. What's a realistic expectation, both in terms of financially underwriting that investment. We are not sacrificing financial returns for positive climate impact. We see opportunities where those things are inextricably linked. So the energy savings, the emissions reduction is central to the business model. And that is also where the financial return and the carbon reduction come from. So we do our own assessment. As these companies, which are early stage when we make our investments, sometimes they're pre-revenue, sometimes they're even pre-product. There may not be anything to measure out in the world commercially at that point. As the companies scale commercially, we certainly may bring on, as appropriate, a third-party carbon accounting firms. I mean, Sierra serves on the board of Europe's leading carbon accounting firm. She did her graduate work at Harvard in life cycle emissions analysis. We take these things extremely seriously, but we will be also efficient in allocating our own time and resources to sort of scale along with the companies and their products.
Incredible. it's very hard to verify these things. So you all don't know how you have time in your day to do anything, but sounds amazing. Abigail, you actually have 2 questions coming up. So we'll spotlight you if we can, and you can ask them directly. Great.
Sure. It's great to meet you both. You kind of already answered part of my first question, which is around the sectors that you're most interested. So I guess if you could focus on a couple other portfolio companies that you're most excited about. And then my second question was around this era of value add investing and providing more than just capital. And what do you think that value is that you provide?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the second question first. There's no shortage of capital that recognizes the value of investing in decarbonization. I mean, this is a bright spot in the market right now. I think in no small part because decarbonization really is durable in the value that it's creating. And so founders, particularly founders of top companies that are building for a real billion-dollar-plus scale, have many options in terms of the investors they choose to team up with. What we found is that founders value our operating experience, the fact that this is our life's work, that we have experience now across 5 companies in climate tech. We've gone the hard yards. We have built for real scale. I mean, the companies that Sarah's built in climate tech alone are currently worth just under $2 billion. Like there's really not that many other people out there at the early level in climate tech who have that level of success in the market. And founders value that. They value the fact that we've built things and we've been scrappy, and we know how hard things can be. And so we have a deep sense of empathy and we've earned a sense of trust and credibility. I think we also, because this is our life's work, bring the benefit of 30 years essentially of community to our work with founders. We have longstanding relationships with policymakers, with leading academics, with corporate partners, with commercialization opportunities in both North America and Europe, with asset financiers. I mean, the list goes on and on. And that is a community of fellow travelers and folks who can really accelerate the specific success of companies at the early stage that we've built over 30 years. So it's a true accelerant to the success of founders that we can bring that to their business models at an early stage. And I think it helps us to stand out when founders are evaluating who they want to team up with.
Thanks, Abigail.
Thank
okay,
you.
so this is another anonymous one, so you get me. What are your recommendations for a young professional trying to get into climate tech investing?
Start angel investing. You do not have to write big checks, but start refining your thesis on what you find meaningful. Start developing your sourcing capacities and your capacities to find great founders and get on those cap tables. My very first check, I speak from personal experience. I wrote in 2015, it was a $2,500 check. Is it not a big check by any means? And I will say that the founder of that company still calls me for advice. He called, he's raising a Series C now. It's being able to create value for founders and to earn founders' trust. That's the thing that's valuable. And then to be able to demonstrate both to yourself and also if you choose to either start a fund or join a fund, that you have a track record of finding great founders and getting involved in their companies early. So you can demonstrate your taste, you can demonstrate your access, you can demonstrate your hustle. You don't have to put a large check to work by any means. So don't let cash be the barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. Would double click on and emphasize all of that. I would also say, for anyone interested in getting into this space or related space, spend a little time being honest with yourself about what you are most interested in within climate tech. It's a very big tent. There's like lots of different kinds of technologies. Even within investing, there's like early stage, there's later stage, there's different sectors. There's also like a whole world of project finance, which might be really interesting to some people. So spend some time just learning everything you can about like what's going on, and then go deeper on the stuff that is most interesting to you. And then also recognize what skill sets you're bringing in from your prior career. I mean, everybody has something to contribute in the world of decarbonization, whether you come from a legal background, a finance or banking background, operational logistics background, all of that's needed. And so to the extent that that overlaps with the companies you're meeting with and the founders you're meeting and the teams whose challenges you're encountering and you can help them on something, like just step in and be helpful. You don't even need to be on the cap table. You don't need to be represented by a big fund. If you can, in a natural way, like find something where you can be useful, just step in and start doing stuff. Like just show up to pitch events or clean energy competitions, like and just talk to people. You will learn something. You will learn a lot of things. I think it's worth recognizing nobody gave us these jobs. Nobody anointed us and said, like, you are now a climate investor. We just started working on things that we cared about, even when, and often, particularly when other people were not focused on those problems, if we really felt they were important and meaningful. This is like a lot of the early work in market design that Sierra was doing. When I started working on carbon removal, I started specifically because I didn't see enough activity happening in the space, and that concerned me. So I wanted to try to contribute something. You will learn a lot. And also, if you go to the blank space, when everyone else catches up with you in a couple of years, you'll find out that you're actually in a really unique and valuable position at that time.
Yeah, I have to add. So I think scout programs are great. I think that also being helpful to other investors is great, because that's also like the access thing, right? So once you have that, being able to share for other people. And then I think what you just said about like, yeah, 2 years down the line when other people catch up, like you could be the world, like a top 0.1% world expert in that thing if you really dig in for like 6 to 12 months, right? Like people have done that before, and you all have done that. And so definitely like find your niche and then go really deep in that if that's someone's approach. And that's just something that I keep in mind too, because like, hi, everything's so scary. And it's like, no, like truly it's all new, it's all frontier, like just commit. Nicole, you're up, unless, were you gonna say something else, Sarah?
Nope, all good.
Cool, go ahead.
Hey, Sarah and Sarah, this has been great. Thank you so much. My name is Nicole. I run Wiring America, and we're focused on accelerating the electrification transition. So love that shout out. My question was actually, I know you mentioned you don't take policy and pricing risk. I wrote this question before you made that comment, but my question was about how the, what opportunity lanes you're seeing right now after the passage of the IRA, and also how you're sort of helping your portfolio think about how they potentially access some of those federal dollars now, or how that might change the trajectory of the business.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing time to be an infrastructure investor. We do not invest in infrastructure, but wow. It is an incredible opportunity for, really accelerating the deployment of actual physical assets out in the real world. Our portfolio is, stands to benefit in a number of ways, everything from sustainable aviation fuel to electrification and energy efficiency in commercial buildings, to onshoring of battery supply chains. And between the IRA and the CHIPS Act, because we've made an investment in a company that is creating hyper efficient computing chips for data centers, there's all of this capital now for enabling the accelerated deployment of actual technologies. The way that we think about enabling companies is, one, keeping really near to the ground on policy development, and guiding our companies in understanding the specific financial incentives that can play into the customer value proposition. And so what does this actually mean in terms of the overall product design, and then how to enable an efficient financial incentive alignment for actual deployment of the thing, be it in fuels, be it in efficiency, be it in new appliances, be it in the actual semiconductors and data center development as well. So across the technology stack, it's the financial incentive and the regulatory tailwinds are meaningless unless you actually build them into the overall product and can just demonstrate to a potential buyer, here is the financial incentive that you will very easily realize almost in a frictionless way in enabling a price-driven buying decision.
Yeah, I think removing the friction to transactions, and particularly for individual people that are switching to do something in a new way, whether that means they own an electric vehicle for the first time and now they have to think about charging, or they're electrifying their home heating or cooling system. These are not frequent purchasing decisions people make, and oftentimes they make them for not purely logical reasons. The total cost of ownership of this electric water heater over the next 20 years is going to save me money, even though it costs more right now. A lot of time people focus on it's going to cost more right now. There are some provisions in the IRA for subsidies for home energy efficiency that I think will help with this. But this is also the job of the entrepreneur, is to smooth that path for the homeowner or just the customer in whatever kind of product category we're talking about, to switch to the new thing and make it as easy or easier than using the current fossil fuel-based paradigm they have. If switching to electrification would be harder and confusing and at least initially more expensive, it's just going to be a cliff drop off of people who make that journey or make that leap. So that's a really big opportunity for folks who are, building at that commercial layer to really smooth that interface between the technologies and what they're capable of doing. Maybe a subsidy program, if there is one, or some other regulatory support or tax breaks or whatever it is, and like the actual implementation and customer usage.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. Connor, I think your question is semi-relevant after that one.
Yeah, hi, Sarah and Sarah. This has been great. Thank you. The question was about, I feel like in the introduction, you emphasized kind of your tech chops and also business model fundamentals as key lenses through which you view your investments. Kind of how do you view founders? What are some of the characteristics you look for? And just knowing that startups often pivot from their original idea, how do you kind of think about a founder's background as investing in them more than maybe the tech or the business model?
We think a lot about it. I mean, that's the third leg of the stool of the opportunity. The market's here, that's obvious. The technology is here, but there are no businesses to invest in without that set of truly ambitious founders who are really capable of building the businesses. So we look for founders who are wildly ambitious and who we think has what it takes to both build the team to go after and define the market opportunity and to continue to seek new information along the way. So it's a combination of ambition and humility that's really careful, that is one, reflective of the market opportunity that will continue to shift and that we find to be inspiring to attracting top talent along the way. Like no one builds in isolation. So it's, we don't have too many particular rules of thumb. One thing we will look at cap tables and see if the founders are wildly off in terms of the overall incentive alignment. Like one founder has 95% of the founding shares and the other one has 5%. You think, all right, this is not a team that's like really built for longevity and scale. Like, let's talk about that. And we don't tend to invest in those sorts of like very lopsided founding arrangements. But it comes back to, can this founder define the market, create the movement from within, and continue to build in line with a dynamic commercial opportunity for billion-dollar scale.
Yeah, we also look for a bias towards action and a really fast learning curve. Like nobody's going to be right 100% of the time on the decisions you're making for your business. And that's okay. I mean, hopefully you'll eventually be right at the big things, but the faster you make those decisions and the more open you are to learning from them, the sooner you will course correct. When the misstep happens, or missteps, there'll be lots of them. I mean, startups are a totally chaotic and crazy journey a lot of the time. So if you picture, two teams that are theoretically, working on the same thing, and one, makes a big move or decision every 6 months, and one makes a big decision every week. In the course of a year, the team that makes a step forward every week is going to be 52 steps ahead in their learning journey. And if something didn't work, they will have already course corrected probably 3 or 4 times and be well ahead by now. The team that makes a move every 6 months is going to be 2 steps into their journey. They won't have learned that much. And unless they're clairvoyant and know what the next 10 years are going to bring ahead of time, that's very worrying in terms of just the speed of how fast you learn and build and get feedback from your own actions and then out into the world, what customers think, what partners think, what's actually working in the lab if you're still developing some kind of physical innovation. So that learning curve is really important. It's hard to picture a team that's been mega successful anywhere in any sector that doesn't move and learn pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. I think to piggyback on what Sarah mentioned too, we see, a lot of teams that have developed truly novel technology. I mean, these are amazing things. And we look for teams that are not focused on elegant analysis, but focused on building things that customers love. Like, who's going to buy this, and how do we get what are customers really needing in their lives? And so that's where the prioritization is. It's not like I created this thing, it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's amazing. That doesn't matter if no one buys it. So we want to find teams like, okay, so what do customers really need that they don't even know sometimes? That's the bias as well.
Thanks, Connor. Do you guys like the mom test? Is that, or how do you recommend people actually talk to customers? Is that something that you recommend?
Oh, of course, talk to customers. Yeah.
I think talk to customers as early as you can, but like, don't talk to your big customers until you're ready. Like the folks that you really want to land, because if you come to them with something half baked and they're really not impressed, it's going to be harder to actually come back to them and get them to sign up.
Absolutely. Okay, my last question, how can we be helpful to you? Are you hiring? What can the community do?
Thank you. Yes, we are absolutely hiring. We are hiring for an investment team. So if you know amazing folks who have terrific judgment in analyzing early stage businesses, who deeply care about climate stabilization and who want to come join us, please spread the word. VoyagerVC.com, careers, we are hiring.
Amazing. Okay, thank you both. Any last words from either of you?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing, this is our lives work. And for a long time, as Sarah pointed out, we were kind of trudging along with a few fellow travelers. The amount of momentum, the fact of a community arriving has been so encouraging. And so I truly, I thank you all for your interest in this. I thank you all for your talent and your time in building solutions to a destabilizing climate. And I want everyone here to thrive, because your success collectively is our success. So good luck. Thank you. And let's go.
You're here.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. That was super energizing for me. Thank you everyone for joining. And let's all do this. We got it.
Thanks, Candice.
Thanks, Candice. Be well.
Bye, everyone.